Nobody taught you this part. They taught you to work hard, stay out of debt, and one day buy a house. That was the plan. That was always the plan. Get stable, get a mortgage, build equity, retire comfortable. 3 generations of the same advice, passed down like scripture. But here's what nobody mentioned. The people giving you that advice built their wealth in a completely different interest rate environment, a completely different housing market, and a completely different economy than the one you're standing in right now. The playbook they handed you was written for a game that no longer exists. And the people who figured that out early, quietly, without announcing it, are pulling ahead. Not because they're smarter, because they stopped treating inherited financial wisdom like fact and started running the actual numbers. So that's what we're doing today. Not the surface numbers, not the mortgage calculator on bank rate. The full picture, the opportunity cost, the liquidity trap, the inflation hedge, the psychological tax that nobody puts on a spreadsheet. All of it. Because right now, in 2026, with rates where they are, with rent trajectories doing what they're doing, and with the average middle-class household one bad year away from a financial crisis, the wrong decision here doesn't cost you comfort. It costs you a decade. Let's set the stage clearly. 2 people. Same net income, $72,000 a year after tax, both living in a mid-sized metro. Think Charlotte, Columbus, Nashville. Not New York, not San Francisco. Real America. Both have $85,000 saved. Both are shopping for the same type of 3-bedroom place in a neighborhood with decent schools and a 25-minute commute. Danielle buys. She puts $80,000 down on a $400,000 home. 20%, and takes a 30-year fixed mortgage at 7.1%, which is where the market has been sitting. Her principal and interest payment is approximately $2,147 a month. Add property taxes at around $380 a month, homeowners insurance at $160, and she's at $2,687 before she's replaced a single appliance. Raymond rents a comparable place for $1,850 a month. He keeps his $85,000 liquid, splits it between a high-yield savings account and a diversified index fund averaging 9% annually. His monthly housing cost is $837 less than Danielle's. He has no maintenance exposure, no property tax liability, and on paper, at month 1, Raymond looks untouchable. But month 1 is a lie. Month 1 is where most people stop thinking. And if you stop at month 1, you will make the wrong call every single time. Here is what actually happens over the next 36 months. Raymond is comfortable. Rent is fixed by his lease. When the dishwasher motor burns out, he texts his landlord. When the HVAC starts making a sound that costs $1,200 to diagnose, that bill goes somewhere else. His only variable cost is lifestyle, and his $85,000 sitting in a 9% environment has quietly compounded to just over $110,000 by the end of year 3, without him adding a single dollar. Danielle's first year looks different. Closing costs took $12,000 before she got the keys. Appraisal, origination fees, title insurance, prepaid interest, it vanishes before she's hung a picture on the wall. Then, in year 1, she sends roughly $25,700 in mortgage payments to her lender. Here's the number they don't put in the brochure. $20,400 of that is pure interest. It goes to the bank. It doesn't build equity. It doesn't appreciate. It is functionally identical to rent, except it comes with a tax deduction that most middle-class borrowers can't even use because they take the standard deduction anyway. At the end of year 3, Raymond has $110,000 in liquid, accessible capital. Danielle has roughly $14,000 in equity from principal reduction, a home that may have appreciated modestly, and every dollar she has is trapped inside a physical structure she can't sell in an afternoon. Through year 3, Raymond is winning, clearly, and he knows it, which is the first dangerous thing. Because winning month to month is not the same as building wealth, and Raymond is about to learn that the hard way through a mechanism that is so slow, so invisible, and so psychologically painless that most people never see it coming until it's already cost them 6 figures. His lease renews. Rent goes up 5.2%. He negotiates it down to 4.8%. Fine. $1,850 becomes $1,939. Next year, $2,032. The year after that, $2,130. Each increase feels like a rounding error. None of them feel like an emergency. But compounding rent inflation at 4% annually is not a rounding error. It is a slow financial suffocation that only becomes visible in retrospect. Danielle's mortgage on month 1 is $2,147. Her mortgage on month 84 is $2,147. Her mortgage on month 360, the last month, 30 years in, is $2,147. The number is a wall. It doesn't move, it doesn't negotiate, it doesn't care what the rental market does, or what inflation does, or what her landlord decides over breakfast on a Tuesday. That fixed number is not a liability. In a world where everything gets more expensive every year, a fixed housing cost is one of the most powerful inflation hedges a middle-class person can legally own. This is the mechanism nobody explains. Inflation makes Danielle's mortgage cheaper in real terms every single year. What costs her 37% of her net income today will cost her 22% in year 15 and less than 14% in year 25. The payment doesn't shrink. Her purchasing power grows around it. Meanwhile, Raymond's rent will eat an increasing percentage of whatever he earns for the rest of his life, with no finish line on the calendar. Now, before we go further, if you're watching this and you've been on the fence about a real financial decision, not just housing, but any major move that involves capital allocation, the single most expensive thing you can do is stay stuck in theory. Hit the subscribe button, because every week we run the actual numbers on decisions the financial media is too cautious to be honest about. This channel exists to give you the analysis that changes how you see money permanently. Now, back to Danielle and Raymond, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. Here's what the renting versus buying debate almost always leaves out: leverage. Raymond has $110,000 invested. His returns come from $110,000. When the market moves 9%, he earns 9% on $110,000. That's his ceiling. Danielle controls a $400,000 asset. She put in $80,000. The other $320,000 is the bank's money, and it is working for her. When her home appreciates 4% in a year, she doesn't earn 4% on $80,000. She earns 4% on $400,000. That's $16,000 in wealth creation from an $80,000 investment, a 20% return on her actual capital before she's made a single extra payment. Leverage is the word wealthy people use. The middle class calls it debt and treats it like a moral failing. The difference in those two frames over 30 years is a generational wealth gap. By year 7, Danielle's home at 3.5% annual appreciation is approximately $503,000. Her mortgage balance has dropped to around $354,000. She's sitting on $149,000 in equity. Her net position from an $80,000 original investment is nearly double. Raymond's index fund, still untouched at 9% compounding, has grown to about $155,000. His net position from an $85,000 investment is also strong. The scoreboard looks close. But here's what the scoreboard isn't showing. Raymond's rent is now $2,408 a month. He is approaching Danielle's total housing cost, and he has nothing to show for 84 months of payments. Not a dollar. Every cent of it went to someone else's equity, someone else's mortgage payoff, someone else's generational wealth transfer.
Meanwhile, Danielle's fixed payment is now equal to a smaller and smaller fraction of everything else in the economy. She also has a credit profile anchored by a performing mortgage. She has a refinance option if rates drop. She has a home equity line available if she needs capital for a business or an emergency. She has an asset that will exist, free and clear, in 23 more years. Raymond has a lease agreement that expires in 11 months. That is the honest comparison. Now, because intellectual honesty matters, let's talk about when Raymond wins, not hypothetically, specifically. If Danielle's home is in a market that stalls or corrects, and some markets will in 2026, her leverage works in reverse. A 10% price decline on a $400,000 home is a $40,000 loss on an $80,000 investment. That's 50% of her down payment evaporated before she's missed a single payment. Raymond, liquid and mobile, loses nothing.
If Danielle loses her income, job loss, disability, a business that collapses, her $2,687 monthly obligation doesn't pause. The bank doesn't care. Forbearance is a temporary bandage on a wound that keeps opening. Raymond can downsize in 60 days. Danielle's exit costs her 5 to 6% in agent commissions, months of carrying costs, and potentially a distressed sale if the market isn't cooperating. If she bought in a city whose economic engine is about to contract, think single-industry towns, government-dependent metros, places where remote work is draining the tax base, her appreciation assumptions are fiction. Appreciation is not a law of physics. It is a local economic phenomenon that depends entirely on employment density, population migration, and capital flows. Get the city wrong, and the entire model breaks. And here is the one Raymond wins cleanly. No argument, full stop, if he actually invests the difference. Every month, every raise, every bonus, without touching it, without rationalizing a car upgrade or a vacation or a kitchen renovation because it's an investment. If Raymond operates like a machine and Danielle operates like a human, Raymond can close the gap significantly by year 20. The brutally honest number, most people don't. The $500 a month savings from renting becomes a slightly nicer life, not a portfolio. And a slightly nicer life does not compound. So let's run the full 30-year scenario without illusions. Danielle makes her final mortgage payment at year 30. Her home, at 3.5% annual appreciation, is worth approximately $1,124,000. She owns it outright. Her monthly housing cost drops to property taxes and insurance, roughly $650 a month. She has a 7-figure asset, 0 debt, and a housing cost that is lower in absolute dollars than what Raymond pays in 2026. Raymond, at year 30, with his rent growing at 4% annually from $1,850, is paying approximately $5,990 a month to his landlord. He has paid over $2.1 million in rent across 30 years and owns nothing. If his investments compounded at 9% uninterrupted for 30 years from his original $85,000, no additions, no withdrawals, he has approximately $1,128,000, roughly equivalent to Danielle's home value. The portfolios look equal, the monthly obligations do not. Danielle's future is $650 a month. Raymond's future is $5,990 and rising for the rest of his life. That asymmetry, not the asset value, the monthly burn rate in retirement, is the real cost. Raymond needs to draw down his portfolio just to pay rent. His $1.1 million starts shrinking the day he stops working. Danielle's $1.1 million sits intact because her housing is already paid for. The sequence matters, the timing matters, and neither of them is visible in a month one comparison. Here's what this actually comes down to, and this is the part most financial content refuses to say clearly. The rent versus buy debate is not really about housing. It is about your personal relationship with variables versus fixed costs. It is about whether you trust yourself to deploy discipline consistently without a structural mechanism forcing you to. A mortgage is a forced savings plan. Every payment builds equity. You cannot accidentally spend it on a spontaneous weekend or renegotiate it away when life gets uncomfortable. Raymond's discipline has to be voluntary, sustained, and unbroken for 30 years. Danielle's is mandatory from day one. The financial system is not neutral. Banks don't offer 30-year fixed mortgages because they want to help you build wealth. They offer them because interest front-loaded amortization schedules mean they collect the majority of their profit in the first decade before most people refinance or sell. Understand that clearly. Your early mortgage payments are enormously profitable for your lender. You are not winning in years 1 through 5. You are financing the bank's margins while slowly, quietly accumulating an asset. The question is whether that slow, quiet accumulation, combined with leverage, fixed costs, and inflation mechanics, outperforms 30 years of market exposure on a base of capital that shrinks monthly against rising rent. In most mid-size American markets, with a stable income and a holding period above 7 years, the math says yes. But the math assumes you buy right, not too much house, not a variable rate in a volatile rate environment, not in a market propped up by short-term speculation, not with a down payment so thin that one slow season wipes your equity and leaves you underwater. The most expensive home purchase is the one you stretch for, the house that requires both incomes running perfectly with no margin for a recession, a layoff, or a medical event. That house doesn't build wealth. It holds you hostage to your own income, while the bank collects a decade of front-loaded interest and calls it a partnership. Buy below your ceiling, not at it. Leave capital in reserve. Keep liquidity. Treat your home as one component of a wealth strategy, not the entire strategy. Because a house is not a retirement account. It's an inflation hedge, a leverage vehicle, and a fixed cost anchor. 3 powerful things, but only 3. If your net worth is entirely trapped in your primary residence, you have not built wealth. You have built an illusion of wealth that you cannot access without selling the roof over your head. That's the trap Danielle avoids if she's disciplined, and the trap she falls directly into if she's not. Raymond avoids it too, but only if he actually invests the difference, keeps his lifestyle flat as his income grows, and doesn't convince himself that renting indefinitely is a strategy rather than a temporary positioning decision. Renting with intention while building capital aggressively toward a future purchase is a legitimate play. Renting by default, year after year, because buying feels complicated or because you keep waiting for the perfect moment, that is not financial independence. That is a slow, comfortable surrender to a system that profits from your inaction. There is no perfect moment. There is only the market that exists, the income you have, the capital you've built, and the discipline you're willing to enforce on yourself. The difference between Danielle and Raymond after 30 years is not talent, it is not luck, it is not even which asset class outperformed, it is whether the decision they each made on year 1 still served them on year 15, because they built it on honest math, not on a monthly number that felt manageable. Run the numbers past month 1, price out the 10-year total, calculate what your rent becomes at 4% annual inflation for 20 years, model what a fixed payment looks like as a percentage of your income in year 18. Then decide. Because the decision you make about housing is not really a housing decision. It is a statement about how you think time interacts with money, and how you think about that right now in 2026 with everything this economy is doing will either compound quietly in your favor or drain silently against you for decades. The numbers don't care which one you prefer. They only care what you actually do.